So you've booked a cruise to Canada.
So today we're going to give you 10 etiquette tips you can use while you're in those Canadian ports.
Hi, we are Jill and Jerry, and we are Canadians that love cruising.
Yes, we are the Cruising Canucks. Canucks is another name for Canadians, and we always say that we're not experts on cruise travel. We just show you what we do and how much fun we have cruising, but we're kind of experts on Canadian etiquette. We kind of know what other Canadians do and what to expect when we see other people, and we definitely know what it looks like when someone's not from Canada trying to pretend to be Canadian. So today we're going to give you 10 tips on how you can fit in when you visit those Canadian ports. Tip number 1 is a big one, and this is one that we see all the time. And that is, don't incorrectly use the word A when you come to Canada.
And by A, we're talking EH.
Yes. So many people come up to us and say, oh, you're Canadian, A. And we can tell right off the bat, you don't have a clue how to use A in a sentence. You know, have you ever seen anybody not from Canada use the word A properly in a sentence?
No.
No, exactly. The way a Canadian uses the word A is like, it's an afterthought. It's almost like a question. We don't even try. You know, we're talking about something and we're describing things and we turn to someone and say, what do you think, A? But it's very subtle. We don't even know we're doing it, in fact. People not from Canada always look at us and say, you just said the word A, and we didn't even know we said it. So
very true.
The secret is to bury it in your sentences so that it doesn't even sound like it exists. Mm-hmm. If you can do that successfully, you might be able to pull it off sound like a Canadian.
There you go. Tip number 2 is, not every Canadian can speak French.
Je ne sais pas.
It is correct that most of us have learnt it and it's been a part of curriculum in school. But to be able to converse in it is not something that all of us can do.
No, Canada has one province that is predominantly French, and that is Quebec. Mm-hmm. We also have another province, New Brunswick, that also has a lot of French. Mm-hmm. And we do get, all through grade school and beginning of high school, we actually get French classes. Mm-hmm. But a lot of us will become adults and we don't use French all the time. We kind of lose it.
We definitely, I mean, speaking personally, I have a way better understanding of French. If someone was to speak to me in French, I could understand what you're saying, but to correctly respond to you in French is not a talent that I have, unfortunately. I wish I could.
So there you go. For those of you that don't speak French and you only speak English, you're going to be okay in Canada. Most of us understand English. Tip number 3, and this may come to you as a shock, is that all Canadians do not know all other Canadians. It is a very, very big country. It's spread out from sea to sea to sea. And we often end up in other countries and they'll say, oh, you're from Canada. Oh, do you know so-and-so? They were on a cruise here last winter and they're from British Columbia, for example.
I have a cousin that lives in Toronto. You must know him. His name is...
Yes, we do not know all other Canadians.
And we definitely don't even know everybody that lives in Toronto.
Yes. There are millions of people in Canada, and unfortunately we only know the ones that are close by and that are friends and family.
Tip number 4, make sure you say sorry and apologize often.
Yes, you have to make sure that you also use excuse me lots. Canadians are very apologetic people. That if we run into someone, if we're coming, say, into the doorway of a restaurant and someone's coming out at the same time, we'll say, sorry.
This happened to me recently on a cruise. I have a little story to go on this one. A lady bumped into me accidentally on the cruise, and as she looked at me, I said, oh, sorry. And she looked and she started to laugh. She goes, you're sorry? You must be Canadian. I'm the one that bumped into you.
Yes, we apologize for everything. Mm-hmm. So if you hear someone saying sorry, they probably are Canadian. And if you start to apologize too and say, excuse me, then you'll be on the right track and fitting right in with Canada. Tip number 5 has to do with food and beverage, specifically beverages. Mm-hmm. And we have pop in Canada. We don't have soda. Yes, we hear this all the time. This is one of the big things that we notice when we go south of the border of the United States is that everybody are ordering sodas. And we're all soda. It's pop. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of our connection with Britain, because we've heard from a lot of people in the UK that it's also a pop over there as well. So if you go into a fast food restaurant in Canada and they're asking you what kind of pop you want, they're talking about soda.
Tip number 6, while traveling in Canada, you won't get gouged for tourist prices. For instance, on our recent cruise when we were in Halifax, a lobster dinner was $25 per person at one of our ports of call. The very next day when we were in the States, the same lobster dinner was $55 US.
Yes, we find in general that all the tourist activities, excursions, and so forth are much cheaper in Canada than what we found when we're cruising at other parts of the world. So there you go. When you come to Canada, you just might get a deal for the next excursion. Tip number 7. This one might surprise you a little bit, but just stop and think about Canada's weather. It's always cold and snowy. At least it feels like it always is for at least half the year. Canadians often go to warm destinations when they take holidays and when they take cruises. So don't be surprised when you suggest to a Canadian to go on an Alaska cruise that they kind of roll their eyes or shake their heads that they want to go somewhere warm.
I think for us it was probably cruise number 40th.
Yeah.
Before we decided let's check out Alaska. And the majority of our cruises up till that point were definitely hot destinations.
Yes, and a lot of things that you find in Alaska, we find in Canada. We have beautiful scenery, we have lots of wildlife, all those things that people enjoy, the cool weather in the summertime,
Yes.
that we already have that in Canada for most of the year. So we like to go to a location that's kind of sandy, beach, palm trees, and nice and warm. So yeah, don't be surprised if that bucket list cruise to Alaska isn't shared by your Canadian friends that you meet when you're in Canada.
Tip number 8, Canadian Mounties. Not all of them are riding horses around Canada. We are currently have automobiles.
Automobiles, electricity, we have all the modern stuff. So our police force, our federal police force, specifically the Canadian Mounties, does not rely on horses as much as most of the pictures you will see of the Canadian Mounties is them in a red uniform sitting on a horse. Yes. You will see that if you go to ceremonies. You often find that in the nation's capital, if there's a changing of the guard ceremony. So, and often if there's a parade. But most Canadians, they drive cars and they're like any other police force around the world.
So you're being forewarned. They will have a car and they do have a radar gun if you're speeding by them.
The Canadian Mounties will get you. Tip number 9 is about what to wear to fit in.
Ooh.
We do not wear puffer jackets, mitts, and toques all year long. When it gets above 15 to 20 degrees Celsius, and you need to learn about the Celsius before you come to Canada, then you'll realize that we wear shorts and t-shirts as well. But we can always tell someone not from Canada, from a more southern climate, when they show up wearing their toques and mitts, and we're all wearing our shorts and t-shirts.
For sure.
We always see this on an Alaska cruise, in fact. Ironically, when we do go to Alaska, it's perfect. It's shorts and t-shirt weather for us, where other people get off with toques and jackets, and we kind of laugh and say, they're not Canadian.
Tip number 10. Canadians are friendly people.
Yes, not only are they friendly, they are helpful. Odds are if you are lost, or you need to ride somewhere, or you need just about anything, a Canadian will be there to help you out. They're always willing to help out someone in need, which is fundamentally the core of what it means to be Canadian. We think back to 9/11 when there was airplanes that were stuck on the tarmac in Newfoundland. There's a famous movie that's been made about how all the local folks showed up with meals. They weren't asked to. They simply thought that, hey, there's people in that airport that probably haven't had a meal for hours or they might need some kind of company. Then they were there at the airport and they showed up with whatever they could find in their kitchen. That is Canadian right there.
So don't be afraid to speak to a local person if you need help or directions or you just want to learn a little bit more about where you're visiting. Anybody would be willing to help you, direct you, or give you a little piece of advice to help you along your journey.
Mm-hmm. So those are our 10 tips of how to practice etiquette in Canada so you will fit in and not look like a tourist. Of course, a lot of them are tongue-in-cheek. A lot of them are common sense. But fundamentally, a lot of them are Canadian, and we always have a good chuckle when we recognize someone who's not Canadian because they're trying to pretend to fit in Canada. The secret to fitting into Canada: be polite, go with the flow, and enjoy yourself, and that's naturally Canadian.
And if you have an upcoming trip to Canada, make sure you have a great time.
For sure. And if you have any suggestions or comments below how to be Canadian, maybe there's some Canadians out there that thought we missed a few. Throw them in the comments. If you have any questions about things you've seen that are odd or have questions about in Canadian ports, ask those and we'll help you out if we can. And be sure to subscribe. So we have traveled to some Canadian ports this past year. You can check that vlog series out. And we actually have more coming later this year as well. So if you subscribe and get a notification, you'll be able to see that content of what to do in the Canadian ports and how to fit in. Thanks everybody for watching. And if you travel to Canada, we hope you have a wonderful time.
Bye for now.